The mining station floated at the edge of the Keller system, where 3 dead planets circled a dying star. Nobody came here anymore. The minerals had run out 15 years ago, and the company that owned the station had simply walked away, leaving the equipment to rust in the vacuum of space. But the station wasn't empty. Inside the main habitat module, 6 people were hiding. They had been there for 8 months, living on recycled air and whatever supplies they could scavenge from the abandoned storage bays. Their leader was a woman named Kate Morrison, a former cargo pilot who had made one too many trips into the forbidden zones and asked one too many questions. The others were like her, people who had seen things they weren't supposed to see, people who knew secrets that could get them killed. Kate stood at the observation window, watching the stars. She was thin now, much thinner than she had been when they first arrived. Food was running low. Water was running low. Everything was running low. But they couldn't leave, not yet. Out there, somewhere in the dark between the stars, the assembly was looking for them. She ran her fingers along the cold metal of the window frame, thinking about how far she had fallen. 2 years ago, she had been a respected pilot with a clean record and a comfortable income. She had flown cargo ships between Earth and the colonies, carrying everything from medical supplies to construction equipment. It was honest work, good work. She had been proud of it. Then came the mission that changed everything. A simple run to the Titan colonies with agricultural equipment. The manifest had been straightforward, the cargo bay had been sealed by the company, and the flight plan had been approved by all the proper authorities. It should have been routine, but Kate had always been careful. Before every flight, she ran a complete systems check, including the cargo bay sensors. It was a habit she had picked up from her first captain, a grizzled old pilot named Garcia who had told her that the most dangerous thing in space was complacency. Check everything, he had said. Trust nothing. The sensors had shown an anomaly. The cargo manifest said 12 tons of agricultural equipment, but the mass readings showed 14 tons. The temperature in the sealed bay should have been stable, but it was fluctuating. And there was a power draw, faint but consistent, coming from somewhere inside the cargo. Kate had documented everything and sent a report to her company. They had responded within hours, telling her that the readings were within acceptable variance and to proceed with the mission. She had pushed back, insisting that something was wrong. They had told her that if she refused to fly, she would be in breach of contract and subject to legal action. So she had made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had unsealed the cargo bay. What she found inside changed everything. Hidden among the agricultural equipment were 3 large containment pods, each one humming with power. Through the transparent sections of the pods, she could see living creatures. They were humanoid, but clearly not human. Their skin was gray and smooth, their eyes were large and dark, and they were floating in some kind of suspension fluid. Kate had taken photos, collected samples of the fluid that had leaked from one of the pods, and resealed the bay. Then she had continued the mission, delivering the cargo as ordered. But when she returned to Earth, she didn't go to her company. She went to the media. The response had been swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, her pilot's license was revoked for violations of cargo security protocols. Her bank accounts were frozen for alleged tax irregularities. And armed security showed up at her apartment with a warrant for her arrest on charges of corporate espionage. Kate had run. She had contacts in the shipping industry, people who owed her favors, and she had used those contacts to disappear. That was when she started meeting others like herself. People who had discovered things, who had asked questions, who had been targeted for knowing too much. Behind her, she heard footsteps. It was Greg Palmer, the station's engineer. He was a quiet man in his 40s who had worked on deep space installations for 20 years before everything went wrong. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice tight with worry. Kate turned away from the window. "Another one. The oxygen recycler is failing. I can patch it, maybe buy us another month, but after that." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "How long do we have?" 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we reduce activity and sleep in shifts. Kate nodded slowly. 3 weeks. They had been running for so long, hiding for so long, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have time. "Do what you can." Greg hesitated at the door. Kate, maybe it's time we considered surrendering. If we turn ourselves in, explain what we know, maybe they'll listen. They won't listen, Greg. They'll make us disappear, and everything we've learned disappears with us. We can't let that happen. So we just wait here to die. We wait here until we find a way to get the truth out. That's all that matters now. Greg left, and Kate was alone again with the stars. She thought about the others in their group and how each of them had their own story of discovery and persecution. Greg had been working on a deep space installation when he noticed something strange in the shipping logs. Weapon systems were being delivered to the station, advanced military hardware that had no business being there. When he asked his supervisor about it, he was told it was classified. When he pushed harder, he found himself transferred to a different project. And when he tried to access the installation's main computers to investigate further, security had come for him. He had barely escaped in a maintenance pod. Linda Chen had been a communications specialist on a military vessel. She had intercepted encrypted transmissions that mentioned something called Project Threshold, along with coordinates in deep space and references to contact protocols with unknown entities. When she tried to decrypt the messages, her security clearance was revoked. When she reported what she had found to her commanding officer, she was confined to quarters pending investigation. She had managed to steal a shuttle and flee before they could silence her permanently. Victor Reese had been a xenobiologist hired by a private research company to study alien artifacts. The artifacts were unlike anything in the Assembly's databases, made from materials that shouldn't exist and displaying technology far beyond anything humanity or the known alien species possessed. Victor had been excited at first, thinking he was contributing to a major scientific breakthrough. Then he started asking where the artifacts came from. The company had refused to answer. He had threatened to publish his findings. The next day, assassins had come for him. He survived only because a friend in security had warned him in time. Amy Grant was a young navigator who had plotted courses for military vessels. She had noticed that some of the routes didn't make sense, taking ships to empty sectors of space where nothing should exist. When she examined the data more closely, she found that entire star systems had been deleted from the navigation databases, systems that showed up in older archives but had been systematically removed from current charts. She had made copies of everything and tried to take them to the authorities. The authorities had tried to kill her. And Peter York, a data analyst for the Assembly Trade Commission, had discovered that thousands of shipping manifests had been altered. Cargo that should have gone to registered colonies had been diverted to unknown coordinates. Resources that should have been accounted for had simply vanished from the records. When he compiled his findings into a report, his supervisor had commended him for his thoroughness and then had him arrested for falsifying data. Each of them had found a piece of the puzzle. Together, they had started to see the whole picture. And what they saw terrified them. The Assembly wasn't just keeping secrets. They were preparing for something big. The weapons platforms, the hidden bases, the encrypted communications, the diverted resources, it all pointed to a massive operation in the forbidden zones. But what kind of operation required that much secrecy? What could possibly justify hiding entire star systems from public knowledge? The door opened again, and this time it was Linda. She had been the station's communications officer back when it was still operational, and she had managed to get some of the old equipment working again. She looked excited, which was unusual. Excitement was dangerous when you were hiding. "Kate, you need to see this," Linda said, her voice trembling slightly. They went to the communications room, a small chamber filled with outdated equipment that Linda had somehow coaxed back to life. The walls were covered with makeshift repairs, wires running everywhere, and several monitors that flickered with unstable power. On one of the screens, lines of text were scrolling past. It was a transmission, encrypted but using an old civilian code that Linda had cracked weeks ago. "It's a distress call," Linda said, pointing at the screen. "From inside one of the zones." Kate leaned closer, reading the text. The message was fragmentary, broken up by interference, but the meaning was clear enough. A ship was in trouble, they were asking for help, and they were broadcasting on a frequency that shouldn't exist, a frequency that was supposed to have been decommissioned decades ago before the assembly had made contact with Earth. Can you trace the source? Linda worked at the console for a moment, her fingers flying over the keys. Yes, it's coming from the Sagaris zone, about 4 days' travel from here at maximum shuttle speed. That's crazy. No one goes into Sagaris. The radiation alone would kill you in hours. That's what they tell us, Linda said quietly. But someone is in there. Someone with a ship and a working transmitter. Someone who knows codes that went out of use before the assembly made first contact with Earth. Kate felt her heart beating faster. This was it. This was what they had been waiting for, the proof they needed. If there were people operating inside the forbidden zones, people using pre-contact technology, then everything the assembly had told humanity was a lie. We need to respond, she said. Kate, we can't. It was Victor standing in the doorway. He had been listening. If we transmit, the assembly will triangulate our position. They'll find us. They're going to find us anyway, Kate said. Greg says we have 3 weeks of oxygen left. We can't hide forever. So what are you suggesting? That we fly into a forbidden zone, into radiation that will cook us alive, to rescue someone who might not even exist. I'm suggesting we find out the truth. Isn't that why we're here? Isn't that why we've been running? Because we wanted answers. Well, maybe there are answers in the Sagaris zone. Maybe whoever is sending that signal knows what's really going on. Victor looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we're going to need a ship. That was the other problem. The mining station had no ships. The company had taken them all when they abandoned the facility. The only vessel anywhere near them was their own small shuttle, which Kate had hidden in one of the outer docking bays when they first arrived. It was barely spaceworthy, designed for short hops between stations, not 4-day journeys into deadly radiation zones. But it was all they had. They spent the next day preparing. Greg stripped parts from the station to upgrade the shuttle's engines and reinforced the hull shielding as best he could with the limited materials available. He worked for 16 hours straight, barely stopping to eat or rest, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades maintaining equipment in hostile environments. Linda programmed the navigation computer with the coordinates from the distress signal, calculating the most efficient route and identifying potential hazards along the way. She cross-referenced their path with every scrap of data they had collected about the forbidden zones, looking for anything that might help them survive the journey. Victor packed what medical supplies they had left, knowing they would probably need them. The radiation would be dangerous even with the enhanced shielding, and he prepared treatments for radiation sickness, burns, and the other injuries they might sustain. Amy reviewed the star charts, plotting the safest route she could find and identifying alternative courses in case they ran into trouble. She marked fuel consumption rates, calculated their margins for error, and prepared backup plans for every conceivable emergency. And Peter copied all their data onto isolated storage drives, making multiple backups and hiding them throughout the station in places where they might survive even if the station was destroyed. It was insurance in case they didn't come back, a way to ensure that their discoveries wouldn't be lost even if they were. Kate watched them work and felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Fear because they were about to do something incredibly dangerous, something that could easily kill them all. Hope because for the first time in months, they were moving forward instead of just hiding. They were taking action, making a choice, rather than simply reacting to threats and running from danger. The night before they left, Kate couldn't sleep. She walked through the empty corridors of the station, thinking about all the workers who had once lived here, all the ordinary people who had mined asteroids and processed ore and never asked questions about what was happening in the darkness beyond their little corner of space. She envied them their ignorance. Life had been simpler when she didn't know the truth, when she could focus on flight plans and cargo manifests and not worry about conspiracies and cover-ups. She found herself in the old mess hall, a large room that could hold 50 people but now sat empty and dark. The tables were still there, bolted to the floor, and she sat at one of them, remembering the photo she had seen in the station's records. Workers laughing, eating together, celebrating someone's birthday. Normal people living normal lives. She pulled out a small data pad and recorded a message just in case. "My name is Kate Morrison. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back, but maybe someone else did. Maybe they have the evidence we've been collecting. Maybe they can finish what we started." She paused, thinking about what to say next. "I want people to know that we weren't crazy. We weren't paranoid. We saw things that didn't make sense, and we asked questions, and we were punished for it. That's not how a free society should work. That's not what humanity is supposed to be." She stopped the recording and saved it to the data pad, then left it hidden under one of the tables, taped to the underside where someone might find it if they were looking carefully. In the morning, they loaded the shuttle. It was a tight fit for all 6 of them, but they managed, squeezing supplies and equipment into every available space. The plan was simple, at least in concept. Linda and Victor would stay behind to maintain the station and monitor communications. They would watch for any sign of assembly activity, ready to warn the shuttle if danger approached. Kate, Greg, Amy, and Peter would make the journey into the Sagaris zone. If they found anything, if they made contact with whoever was sending the distress signal, they would transmit the evidence back to Linda. She would then broadcast it on every frequency she could access, making sure the information got out before the assembly could stop them. It was a suicide mission, really. They all knew it. The radiation levels in Sagaris were supposed to be lethal. The zone was supposedly filled with unstable stellar phenomena that could tear a ship apart. And even if they survived the journey, they had no idea what they would find at the source of the signal. It could be a trap. It could be nothing. It could be something worse than they imagined. But they also knew they didn't have any other choice. They had come too far, learned too much to turn back now. And if they did nothing, if they just stayed on the mining station waiting for their oxygen to run out, then all their discoveries would die with them. At least this way, they had a chance. A small chance, but a chance nonetheless. The shuttle detached from the station with a gentle thud that reverberated through the hull. Kate sat in the pilot's seat, her hands on the controls, and for a moment she let herself remember what it had been like to fly commercially, to have a schedule and a route and a safe destination. Those days were gone now, burned away by the truth she had discovered. "Course laid in," Amy said from the navigation station, her voice steady despite the fear Kate could see in her eyes. "Engines online," Greg reported from engineering. "Shielding at maximum. We're as ready as we'll ever be." "Data recorders active," Peter added from his station. "Everything we see from this point forward will be documented." Kate took a breath and engaged the drive. The shuttle accelerated away from the mining station, away from the dying star, toward the dark heart of the Sagaris zone. She didn't look back. Looking back would only make this harder. For the first 2 days, the journey was uneventful. They traveled through empty space, seeing nothing but distant stars and the occasional piece of space debris, remnants of old mining operations or abandoned satellites. They took turns sleeping in the cramped rear compartment, eating from their dwindling supplies of nutrient paste and recycled water, and checking the instruments for any sign of pursuit. The assembly had ships everywhere, fast attack cruisers that could overtake a shuttle in minutes, and sensors that could detect a ship from light years away. But their own sensors remained clear, showing nothing but empty space around them. Kate used the time to think about what they might find. The distress signal had been deliberately sent on an old frequency, which suggested whoever sent it wanted to be found by someone who knew the old codes, someone who had been around before first contact. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Humans hadn't been in deep space before the assembly made contact in 1996. At least that's what everyone believed. That's what the history books said, what the official records claimed, unless it was a lie. Unless humanity's presence in space went back much further than anyone knew. Unless there had been another history, a secret history, running parallel to the official one. On the 3rd day, they began to detect the radiation. It started as a faint hiss in the background sensors, barely noticeable at first, then grew stronger hour by hour. Greg monitored it constantly, adjusting the shielding, rerouting power to the protective systems, doing everything he could to keep them safe. The readings climbed higher and higher, approaching levels that should have been dangerous but never quite reaching the lethal thresholds that the assembly's data predicted. "This doesn't make sense," he said, staring at his screen with a puzzled expression. "According to the Assembly's data, we should be dead already. The radiation levels they published say that anything entering the Sagaris zone would receive a fatal dose within the first hour. But the actual levels are high. Yes, definitely higher than comfortable, but not lethal. It's like someone has been exaggerating the danger for years, or the data was deliberately falsified to keep people away. Or lying about it," Kate said, her mind racing through the implications. "If you want to keep people away from an area, one way to do it is to make them believe it's more dangerous than it really is. You don't need physical barriers if everyone thinks that going there means certain death." "But why?" Amy asked, her young face creased with confusion. "What could possibly be worth hiding in a place like this? What's so important that they would lie about radiation levels and declare an entire region of space off limits?" They would have their answer soon enough. On the fourth day, after 96 hours of continuous flight through increasingly strange space, they reached the coordinates from the distress signal. What they found there changed everything Kate thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe. It wasn't a ship in distress. It was a city. Floating in the void, massive and ancient, was a structure unlike anything Kate had ever seen in all her years of space flight. It was built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, shaped into geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long, as if the human brain wasn't meant to process such architecture. The structure followed design principles that didn't match human or assembly engineering, using angles and curves that seemed to defy the normal rules of physics. Towers and spires reached out in all directions, connected by bridges and causeways that appeared to hang in space without visible support. Some sections seemed to phase in and out of normal space, flickering like a bad transmission, there one moment and gone the next. And it was huge, easily the size of a small moon, perhaps larger than the entire mining station they had come from. "What is that?" Amy whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror in equal measure. Peter was already scanning it, his instruments working overtime, sensors pushed to their limits. "I'm reading power signatures, lots of them. This thing is active, not just a derelict, and I'm detecting life signs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The structure is teeming with activity." "Human?" Kate asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "I think so. The biosigns match human parameters, at least mostly. But there's something else too, something mixed in with the human readings. Something I can't identify. It's like the readings are being distorted by the structure itself, or there's some kind of interference I don't understand." As they watched, their eyes wide and their hearts pounding, a section of the massive structure opened smoothly, revealing a docking bay large enough to swallow their shuttle 10 times over. The bay was illuminated from within, a warm golden light that seemed almost welcoming after days in the cold darkness of space. A beam of pale blue light shot out, touching their hull with a gentle pulse that made the shuttle's instruments chirp and beep. "We're being scanned," Greg said, his hands moving quickly over his console, checking systems and preparing for the worst. "The scan is comprehensive but not hostile. Whoever they are, they're being thorough, checking every system we have, but they're not trying to damage us or take control." Then a voice came through their communication system, speaking in English, but with an accent that sounded strange and old-fashioned, like something from historical recordings Kate had heard in school. The pronunciation was slightly off, the rhythm different from modern speech patterns, with inflections that belonged to a different era. "Shuttle Wanderer, this is Threshold Station. We've been expecting you. Please proceed to Docking Bay 7. Welcome to the truth." Kate's hands trembled on the controls, her breath coming faster. This was it, the moment that would change everything. The moment that would either confirm their wildest theories or prove they had been chasing shadows. She looked at her crew, saw the fear and excitement warring in their faces, saw Greg's jaw set with determination, Amy's eyes wide with wonder, Peter's fingers frozen over his instruments. And she made her decision. She guided the shuttle into the docking bay, her hands steady now despite her racing heart. The bay was enormous, a cathedral of metal and light, filled with other ships of designs Kate had never seen before. Some looked human-made, recognizable as modified versions of civilian or military craft, but upgraded and altered with technology that seemed decades ahead of anything in current use. There were cargo vessels with drives that looked nothing like standard propulsion systems, fighters with weapon mounts for guns that didn't appear in any catalog she knew, and larger ships whose purpose she couldn't even guess. Others were clearly alien in origin, but not from any species she recognized from the assembly databases. There were ships with organic curves, ships with crystalline structures, ships that seemed to be made of pure energy contained in magnetic fields. And there were people moving between them, hundreds of workers in black uniforms, wearing that same circular patch showing Earth surrounded by stars. They moved with purpose and efficiency, maintaining ships, loading supplies, conducting inspections, all with the practiced ease of people who had been doing this work for a very long time. As soon as the shuttle touched down with a gentle bump, a boarding ramp extended to their airlock with mechanical precision. Kate stood, feeling her legs protest after days of sitting, and checked the pistol she had hidden in her jacket. It was a small comfort, probably useless against whatever they might face, but it made her feel slightly better. She nodded to the others and they gathered their equipment, their data pads, their recording devices. Whatever happened next, they were going to document it. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and they stepped out onto Threshold Station. A man was waiting for them at the base of the ramp, standing at attention in a way that suggested military training. He was tall and lean, maybe 60 years old, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that had seen too much, eyes that held depths of experience and sorrow. He wore a simple black uniform identical to those worn by the workers around them, with that same circular patch on the shoulder showing Earth surrounded by stars. There were no rank insignia, no medals, no decorations of any kind, nothing to indicate his position except the quiet authority in his bearing, and the way the other workers seemed to defer to him as they passed. "Captain Morrison," he said, extending his hand with a slight smile. "My name is Commander Nathan Price. We've been monitoring your activities for some time. We're glad you made it here safely. The journey through Sagaris can be dangerous even with proper equipment." Kate shook his hand cautiously, noting the firm grip and the calluses that spoke of years of physical work. "You sent the distress signal." "We did. We needed to make contact, and we knew you were one of the few people who would respond. Most would have dismissed it as a hoax or a trap, or been too afraid to investigate. But we've been watching you, all of you, tracking your movements, monitoring your communications, and we knew you were different. You're the kind of people who ask questions even when it's dangerous to do so, who pursue the truth even when powerful forces try to stop you." He gestured toward the interior of the station with his free hand. "Please, follow me. There's much you need to see, and we don't have as much time as I'd like. Events are moving faster than we anticipated." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever, wide passages with high ceilings and walls lined with equipment and displays. They passed hundreds of people at work, all wearing those black uniforms with the Earth patch. Kate saw engineers maintaining systems that looked both familiar and alien, their hands moving with the practiced ease of long experience as they calibrated instruments and adjusted settings. She saw scientists studying data on screens that displayed information in formats she didn't recognize, graphs and charts, and three-dimensional models that seemed to show things beyond her understanding. She saw soldiers training with weapons she couldn't identify, moving through combat drills that suggested decades of practice and refinement. Everyone moved with purpose, and everyone wore the same patch Nathan had on his uniform. Earth surrounded by stars, a symbol of something Kate was only beginning to understand. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly in the vast corridor. "This is one of 17 stations hidden throughout the Forbidden Zones," Nathan said as they walked, his pace steady and measured. "We call them threshold stations because they exist on the threshold between what humanity knows and what humanity needs to know. We've been here for a very long time, Captain. Longer than the Galactic Assembly has been in contact with Earth. Longer than human space flight, at least according to the official histories that most people learn in school." That's impossible, Kate said, though even as she spoke, she knew it might not be. Is it? Tell me, what do you know about first contact, the official story that everyone learns? The Assembly made contact with Earth in 1996. They invited us to join the galactic community. We were considered a primitive species, barely ready for space travel, and they graciously shared their technology with us, helped us take our first steps into the larger universe. And what if I told you that story was carefully constructed? What if first contact happened much earlier? And what if it wasn't peaceful? What if everything you've been told about humanity's place in the galaxy is a carefully maintained fiction designed to protect us from a truth we weren't ready to handle? They entered a large chamber with a massive window that looked out into space. But instead of the expected view of stars and nebulae, Kate saw something that made her blood run cold and her breath catch in her throat. Ships. Hundreds of them. Thousands. A fleet so vast it seemed to fill the entire visible zone, arranged in precise formations that suggested military organization on a scale beyond anything she had imagined possible, beyond anything she had thought humanity capable of producing. 1947, Nathan said, his voice taking on the tone of someone reciting a well-rehearsed history, a story told many times to many people. Earth was visited by an alien species. Not the Assembly, something else, something dangerous. They came not as explorers or traders, not as friends seeking peaceful exchange, but as conquerors. They came to harvest, to extract, to destroy. They saw humanity as a primitive species, easy prey, a world ripe for exploitation and subjugation. He turned to face Kate and her crew, his expression grave. But they made a mistake. They underestimated us. They thought we would be easy to conquer because we lacked advanced technology. They didn't account for human ingenuity, for our ability to adapt and learn and fight back against overwhelming odds. A group of pilots, soldiers, and scientists fought back using nothing but courage and desperation at first. Then they captured alien technology, studied it, learned how it worked. They reverse-engineered the enemy's weapons and propulsion systems, and they drove the invaders away, but at a terrible cost in lives and resources. Nathan walked to the window, looking out at the fleet with eyes that had seen too much. But the victory came with knowledge that we weren't alone in the universe, and that the universe was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Knowledge that the aliens would return someday, better prepared and in greater numbers. The government knew that if this information became public, it would cause panic on a global scale. People would demand action, demand protection, but we weren't ready. We needed time to prepare, time to build, time to learn. He turned back to them. So they made a decision. They would prepare humanity in secret. They would build ships based on captured technology, train crews in hidden facilities, establish bases in locations that no one would think to look. They would create a shadow military, a secret defense force that operated outside normal channels, and they would wait for the real threat to return while letting the world believe we were safe and alone. The Assembly, Kate said, beginning to understand the full scope of what she was being told. No, the Assembly came later, decades later in the 1980s. They're not the enemy, Captain. They're not even the real power in this galaxy. They're just another layer of protection, another buffer between humanity and what's really out there. When they found Earth, we let them think they had discovered us. We fed them carefully prepared information, guided their perception of human capabilities, made them believe we were a primitive species just developing space travel. We let them believe they're in control of first contact, that they're the benevolent elder civilization helping the young humans find their way. Because as long as they believe that, as long as they think they understand us, the real enemy won't know about us. Won't know that Earth has been preparing for war for almost 80 years. Won't know about the fleet, the weapons, the bases hidden in the forbidden zones. Kate felt dizzy, her worldview crumbling and reforming with every word Nathan spoke. The implications were staggering, the scope of the deception almost beyond comprehension. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because the situation has changed. The enemy is coming back. Our detection systems, systems that the Assembly doesn't even know exist, systems we've had in place for decades, picked up their scouts 6 months ago. They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses, gathering intelligence about our current capabilities. And we need help. We need people like you, people who ask questions, people who don't accept easy answers, people who have already proven they're willing to risk everything for the truth. We need you to help us prepare Earth for what's coming. Earth doesn't even know you exist. No, but you're going to tell them. You and your crew. You're going to take evidence back, broadcast it everywhere, make sure everyone knows the truth about what we've been doing for the last 80 years. And when the assembly tries to silence you, when they send their ships and their agents to shut you down because they want to maintain the fiction, we'll be there to protect you. Because once the truth is out, once humanity knows what we've been doing all these years, the fiction won't be necessary anymore. We can stop hiding. We can stop pretending. We can bring all our resources to bear openly, unite all of humanity's military and industrial capacity for the fight that's coming. He handed her a data drive, a small device that weighed almost nothing but contained information that would shake the foundations of human civilization. Everything is on here. Technical specifications of captured technology and how we've adapted it. Historical records of the first invasion with eyewitness accounts and documentation. Intercepted communications from the enemy showing their return. Personnel files of everyone who has served in the secret fleet. Thousands of people who gave up their lives to protect Earth. Take it. Share it. Let humanity know that we've been fighting for them all along, and that the real war is about to begin. Kate took the drive with trembling hands, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders like a physical burden. She looked at Greg, Amy, and Peter. They all looked as shocked as she felt, their faces pale in the harsh light of the chamber, their eyes wide with the magnitude of what they were being told. "What is the enemy?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Nathan walked to the window and pointed at something in the distance, far beyond the fleet. At first, Kate couldn't see anything, just the normal darkness of space. Then the stars shifted in a way that wasn't natural, and she realized what she was looking at. It wasn't empty space. It was something massive, something that bent light around itself like a black hole but with a different quality, something that seemed to pulse with a dark energy that made her skin crawl even from this distance. Something that felt alive in a way that nothing made of metal or stone should feel. "We call them the Swarm," Nathan said, and for the first time since they had met, Kate heard real fear in his voice, a tremor of terror that no amount of military training could completely suppress. "They're not a species, not in any conventional sense. They're not individuals working together. They're a collective intelligence that consumes entire civilizations, absorbs their knowledge and technology, and moves on to the next target like locusts stripping a field. They attacked Earth once in 1947, and we barely survived. They underestimated us that time, thought we would be easy prey, but they learned from that mistake. Now they're coming back, and they're bringing everything they've learned in the last 80 years, all the weapons and strategies and knowledge they've absorbed from the civilizations they've destroyed since then." He turned to face her, and Kate saw tears in his eyes, real tears from a man who had probably seen more death and destruction than anyone should have to witness. "We've been preparing for this moment since before you were born, Captain, since before your parents were born. Every innovation, every technological advancement, every step humanity has taken into space has been guided by this knowledge, shaped by this preparation. We've been building toward this day for 8 decades, training generations of soldiers and pilots and engineers, all in secret. And now it's time for everyone to know. Time for Earth to stop being protected in ignorance and start protecting itself with full knowledge of the threat we face. Time for humanity to stand together, not as separate nations or colonies or corporations, but as one species facing an existential challenge that could wipe us out completely if we fail." Kate looked down at the data drive in her hand. It was small, almost weightless, a piece of technology so simple a child could use it. But it felt like it carried the weight of the entire world, the weight of 80 years of secrets and sacrifices and preparations. She thought about all the people back on Earth, living their normal lives, going to work, raising children, making plans for the future, completely unaware of what was waiting for them in the darkness between stars. In a few days, if she did what Nathan was asking, all of that would change. Their world would never be the same. The age of innocence would be over. When? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months, maybe less. The swarm moves slowly, methodically, like a force of nature grinding forward. But once they commit to an attack, nothing can stop them except total resistance. Every ship we can field, every weapon we can deploy, every person willing to fight. And even then, even with everything we've built and prepared, victory isn't guaranteed, but at least we'll have a chance. At least humanity will face its enemy with eyes open instead of being caught completely unprepared. Kate nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision settling over her. She understood now why they had been running, why they had been hunted. They weren't just whistleblowers who had discovered a conspiracy. They were the catalyst. The people who would force the truth into the open and change everything. The people who would trigger the greatest transformation in human history, the moment when humanity stopped being children protected by lies and became adults facing a hostile universe with full knowledge of the dangers. "We'll do it," she said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "We'll make sure everyone knows." Nathan smiled for the first time since they had met, and it transformed his face, made him look years younger despite the gray hair and the lines of worry and stress. "I know you will. That's why we chose you, Kate Morrison. That's why we let you find the clues, why we let you discover just enough to make you curious, why we sent that distress signal knowing you would be the one to respond. You're exactly the kind of person we need to tell this story, someone who people will believe, someone who has already sacrificed everything for the truth." He gestured around them at the massive station, at the fleet visible through the window, at the thousands of people working to prepare for a war most of humanity didn't know was coming. "Welcome to Threshold Station, Captain. Welcome to the truth. And welcome to the real fight for humanity's survival." Kate spent 3 days on Threshold Station learning secrets that would reshape human history. Nathan Price became her guide through this hidden world, showing her facilities that had been operating in silence for decades. She met engineers who had spent their entire careers maintaining weapon systems no civilian had ever seen. She spoke with pilots who flew ships built from technology reverse engineered from alien invaders. And she listened to stories from soldiers who had trained for a war that most of humanity didn't know was coming. On the second day, Nathan took her to meet someone special. They walked through a section of the station that felt older than the rest, where the walls showed signs of repairs and patches accumulated over many years. The corridors here were quieter, less traveled, with a sense of history that the newer sections lacked. He stopped at a door marked only with a number and knocked gently. "Come in," a woman's voice called from inside. The room was small and filled with plants, real plants growing in carefully tended pots under artificial lights that simulated natural sunlight. An elderly woman sat in a chair by the window, her hands covered in soil from the garden she was tending. She looked to be in her 80s, with white hair pulled back in a simple braid and eyes that were still sharp and alert despite her age. "Sophie," Nathan said gently. "This is Captain Kate Morrison. The one I told you about." The woman stood slowly, her movements careful but not weak, wiping her hands on a cloth. "So you're the one who's going to tell everyone the truth. Good, it's about time." She extended a hand to Kate. "I'm Sophie Turner. I've been here for 42 years. Kate shook her hand, feeling the strength still there despite the age, the firm grip of someone who had worked with their hands all their life. 42 years. You've been on this station since 1984. I was a teacher back then, had a good life in a small town in Oregon, a daughter I loved more than anything in the world. Then one day, men in black uniforms showed up at my house and told me I had a choice to make. They explained what was really happening in the world, showed me evidence of the threat that most people didn't know existed, and asked if I wanted to help protect my daughter's future." Sophie smiled sadly, her eyes distant with memory. "How could I say no? What kind of mother would I be if I turned my back on the chance to keep my child safe? But you had to leave everything behind." "Yes. My daughter thinks I died in a car accident on a rainy night in November. She was 30 years old when it happened, just starting her own family. She's 72 now, lives in Seattle with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I've watched her from a distance all these years through surveillance feeds and occasional reports, seen her grow old while I stayed here, working to keep her safe from a threat she never knew existed. Sophie sat back down, gesturing for Kate to take the other chair. Do you know what the hardest part is? Not the work, not the danger, not even the isolation. It's knowing that she'll never know what I did. She'll never know that her mother was part of something important, something that mattered more than almost anything. Kate felt tears burning in her eyes thinking about the magnitude of that sacrifice. When we broadcast the truth, people will know. Your daughter will know what you did. Maybe. But she'll also know I lied to her for her entire life, that I let her grieve for a mother who wasn't really dead, let her grow up thinking she had been abandoned by fate. I'm not sure which is worse, the lie or the truth. Sophie reached out and took Kate's hand in both of hers. But you need to tell the story anyway. Because individual pain doesn't matter when the survival of the species is at stake. That's what I've learned in 42 years of living in the shadows. Sometimes love means sacrifice that nobody will ever understand or appreciate. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is protection they'll never know they needed. That conversation stayed with Kate long after she left Sophie's room. She thought about all the people on Threshold Station, all the lives that had been put on hold or abandoned entirely for this secret mission. Thousands of men and women who had given up everything, their families, their careers, their identities, to protect a world that would never know their names. How many children like Sophie's daughter had grown up thinking their parents were dead? How many spouses had mourned partners who were actually alive and fighting in secret? The weight of those sacrifices pressed down on Kate's shoulders like a physical burden. On the third day, Nathan showed her the evidence. They went to a secure archive deep in the station's core, passing through multiple security checkpoints and biometric scanners, where walls of servers hummed with stored data accumulated over decades. The air was cool and dry, carefully controlled to preserve the delicate electronics. Nathan handed her drive after drive, each one filled with documentation that would shake the foundations of human civilization. There were military reports from 1947 describing the initial invasion in brutal detail, complete with photographs that showed alien craft crashed in the New Mexico desert and strange bodies recovered from the wreckage. The images were grainy and old, but unmistakably genuine. There were technical schematics showing how human scientists had studied the alien technology piece by piece, learning to replicate the propulsion systems, the weapons, the materials that shouldn't exist according to known physics. There were personnel files for thousands of people who had been recruited into the secret program over the decades, ordinary people from all walks of life who had become extraordinary defenders. And there were the recent reports, the ones that made Kate's blood run cold. Sensor logs showing alien scout ships at the edge of human space, moving in patterns that suggested systematic reconnaissance. Intercepted transmissions in a language that even advanced computers could barely translate, filled with references to harvest cycles and resource extraction. Projections showing possible invasion routes based on the enemy's previous tactics and estimated enemy strength based on the growth patterns observed in other galaxies. How many ships do they have? Kate asked, staring at a tactical display that showed red icons spreading across the map like a disease. We don't know for certain. Our best estimate based on long-range observations is somewhere between 10,000 and 50,000 vessels, depending on how much they've grown since the last encounter and how many resources they've consumed from other civilizations. Nathan pulled up another screen showing comparison data. For comparison, the entire human military, including the secret fleet that we've been building for 80 years, has approximately 3,000 combat-capable ships. We're outnumbered at least 3 to 1, possibly as much as 15 to 1. Then how can we possibly win? The same way we won in 1947, by being smarter, more adaptable, and more determined than they expect us to be. The swarm is powerful, incredibly powerful, but they're predictable. They follow patterns that never change, use the same strategies over and over because those strategies have always worked for them. We've spent 80 years studying those patterns, developing countermeasures, finding weaknesses in systems that seem invincible. Nathan turned to face her, his expression intense. We can win, Kate, but only if humanity fights together with full knowledge of what we're facing. That's why your mission is so important. You're going to give us that unity, that common purpose that we need to survive. Kate looked at the data drives in her hands, small devices that contain the power to change everything. What happens after we broadcast this? How will people react when they learn their entire history has been a carefully constructed lie? Honestly, I don't know. Some will panic, unable to process the magnitude of the deception. Some will deny it, insist it's all fake because accepting it would mean their worldview is fundamentally wrong. Some will demand immediate action, want to mobilize every ship and weapon we have right away. But eventually, once the initial shock wears off and people have time to think, I think humanity will do what it always does when faced with an existential threat. We'll come together. We'll put aside our differences and petty conflicts. We'll fight. And we'll find a way to survive. He smiled grimly. We're very good at surviving, even when the odds seem impossible. That evening, as the station's artificial day cycle dimmed to simulate night, Kate and her crew prepared to leave. The shuttle had been refueled and upgraded with better engines and weapon systems that Nathan's engineers had installed while they were touring the facility. It was still the same small vessel, but now it had teeth. Improved shields, upgraded sensors, and compact but powerful weapons that could punch well above the shuttle's weight class. Greg spent hours learning the new systems, memorizing every control and procedure, practicing on simulators until he could operate them by instinct. Amy plotted their course back to the mining station, accounting for the upgrades and the precious cargo of truth they carried, calculating fuel consumption and emergency alternatives. Peter secured all the data drives in a specially shielded container that would protect them from electromagnetic pulses, radiation, even the explosive decompression of the hull if the worst happened. Before they left, Nathan gave Kate one more thing. It was a communications device, small enough to fit in her pocket but powerful enough to reach across star systems using quantum entanglement. This is connected directly to our network, he explained, demonstrating the simple activation sequence. If you're ever in danger, if the assembly sends ships after you, or if anything goes wrong, activate this and we'll come. No matter where you are, no matter what's happening, we'll come. You have my word on that. Kate took the device and secured it carefully in the inner pocket of her jacket. Thank you for everything, for trusting us with this responsibility. Thank you for being willing to carry it. What you're about to do is dangerous, possibly suicidal. The assembly will try to stop you with everything they have. They'll send ships, agents, possibly even attempt assassination to keep this information from getting out. But you're giving us a chance to unite humanity, and that's all we can ask for. They shook hands, and Kate led her crew back to the shuttle. As they climbed aboard and sealed the airlock, she looked back at Threshold Station one last time. It hung in space like a dark jewel, hiding secrets that had been kept for generations, a monument to human determination and sacrifice. Soon, those secrets would be revealed. Soon, everything would change. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The journey back took only 2 days thanks to the upgraded engines that pushed the shuttle to speeds Kate had never thought possible in such a small vessel. They traveled through empty space, the shuttle's new stealth systems hiding them from sensors that might detect a normal vessel, making them nearly invisible to anyone who might be looking. Kate spent most of the trip reviewing the data, making sure she understood everything they had learned, preparing herself for what came next. The story was incredible, almost unbelievable, but the evidence was solid. Photographs, videos, technical specifications, eyewitness testimony from hundreds of sources spanning 8 decades. No one would be able to dismiss this as a hoax or conspiracy theory, not with this much corroboration. When they reached the mining station, Linda and Victor were waiting anxiously in the communications room. As soon as Kate came through the airlock, Linda grabbed her in a tight hug that spoke of days of worry and fear. "We were so worried. You were gone for 5 days." We thought maybe the signal was a trap, maybe you'd been captured or killed." "We're fine," Kate said, returning the hug with equal intensity. "Better than fine. We found it, Linda. We found the truth, and it's bigger than we ever imagined." They gathered in the communications room, and Kate showed them everything. She played the videos Nathan had given her, displayed the photographs on every available screen, explained what she had learned about the invasion in 1947 and the secret preparation that had followed. She told them about Sophie Turner and the thousands like her who had sacrificed everything. She showed them the tactical projections, the enemy fleet estimates, the timeline for the coming invasion. Linda and Victor listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions but mostly just absorbing the enormity of what they were being told, their faces reflecting shock and awe and growing determination. When Kate finished, after nearly 2 hours of explanation, Linda spoke first. "This is bigger than we imagined. If we broadcast this, if we really put it out there for everyone to see, there's no going back. The world will never be the same. People will never see their governments or their history the same way." "I know," Kate said, "but that's exactly why we have to do it. People deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know what's coming and have a chance to prepare, to make their own choices about how to face it." "The assembly will try to stop us," Victor said, his analytical mind already working through the tactical implications. "They'll send ships, probably before we even finish the broadcast. We need to be ready for that, have a plan for what happens when they arrive." Nathan gave us protection. Kate showed them the communication device, explaining its function. "If assembly ships come, we call for help and the secret fleet responds. But we need to start broadcasting immediately. The longer we wait, the more time they have to find us and shut us down before the message gets out." Linda nodded and turned to her equipment, her fingers already moving over the controls. "I'll need a few hours to set up. I want to broadcast on every channel simultaneously, civilian and military, Earth and all the colonies. I want to hit every communication network at once, flood the system so they can't shut us down before the message gets out to enough people that suppression becomes impossible." "Do it," Kate said. "We didn't come this far to hesitate now." While Linda worked on the broadcast setup, programming complex transmission sequences and encryption protocols, Kate recorded her statement. She sat in front of a camera and told the story as clearly as she could, starting with her own discovery of the alien pods in her cargo hold and ending with what she had learned on Threshold Station. She explained about the invasion in 1947, about the secret military that had been built in response over decades of hidden work, about the forbidden zones and what they really contained. She showed the evidence piece by piece, building a case that no reasonable person could deny, letting the facts speak for themselves. It took her 6 hours to record everything, stopping and starting, making sure every detail was accurate and every piece of evidence was properly presented. When she finished, her voice was hoarse and she was exhausted, but she felt satisfied. This was the truth, presented plainly and honestly without embellishment or exaggeration. This was what the world needed to see. Linda worked through the night, barely stopping to eat or rest, programming the broadcast protocols and setting up the transmission sequences. She built in redundancies and fail-safes, ensuring that even if part of the transmission was blocked, the rest would get through. By morning, as the station's systems indicated the start of a new day cycle, everything was ready. The data was compressed and encrypted, ready to be sent to thousands of receiving stations simultaneously. Once the broadcast started, it would be impossible to stop completely. The information would spread faster than any attempt at suppression could move, replicating across networks like a virus designed to spread truth instead of harm. They gathered in the communications room one final time. Kate looked at each of her crew members, these people who had become her family over months of hiding and running and fighting. Greg, solid and dependable, who had kept their failing equipment running when it should have broken down completely. Linda, brilliant and determined, who had cracked codes and found signals that no one else could detect. Victor, cautious and thoughtful, who had helped them avoid capture time and time again through careful planning. Amy, young but brave, who had never wavered even when the danger seemed overwhelming, and Peter, quiet and thorough, who had documented everything and made sure no evidence was ever lost. "This is it," Kate said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Once we start, there's no stopping. Everyone ready?" They all nodded, their faces showing determination mixed with fear. "Linda, begin the broadcast." Linda's fingers moved over her controls, entering commands that had been carefully planned and rehearsed. "Broadcasting now. Signal is going out on all channels. Encryption is holding. The data is flowing." Kate watched the monitors as the information began to spread like ripples in a pond. Within minutes, the first responses started coming in. Automated systems were receiving the data and forwarding it to their networks without human intervention. News organizations were picking up the signal and beginning to analyze it, their systems flagging it as priority content. Military channels were lighting up with activity as officers tried to figure out what they were seeing, confusion and alarm spreading through their ranks. And then the questions started. Messages flooded in from all over human space, people demanding to know if this was real, if the evidence was genuine, if humanity had really been hiding a secret military for 80 years. Kate had prepared responses, brief statements confirming the authenticity, but there were too many questions to answer them all. The story was spreading faster than she had dared to hope, growing exponentially as each person who saw it shared it with others. "It's working," Peter said, monitoring the data flow on multiple screens. "The information is replicating across networks. Even if they shut us down now, it's too late. The truth is out there, spreading beyond anyone's ability to contain it." Kate felt relief wash over her, followed immediately by fear. Because if the truth was spreading, that meant the assembly knew about it, and they would respond with force. She didn't have to wait long. "Contact," Amy called out from the sensor station they had set up using salvaged equipment. "Multiple ships incoming, fast approach. Configuration matches assembly cruisers. 6 vessels, heavily armed, moving in attack formation." Kate's hand went to the communication device Nathan had given her. "How long until they reach us?" 15 minutes at their current speed." Kate activated the device, pressing the sequence Nathan had shown her. "Threshold command, this is Kate Morrison, we need help. Assembly ships are converging on our position. We've started the broadcast, but we need protection to finish it." Nathan's voice came through immediately, calm and professional despite the urgency of the situation. "Understood, Captain. Help is already on the way. Transponder signatures show 8 of our vessels in your vicinity, moving to intercept. Hold your position and prepare for possible combat. If the station comes under fire, evacuate to the shuttle and prepare to run." 8 ships against 6, Greg said, running calculations on his screen. "Those are decent odds, especially if our ships are as advanced as you say." "Unless more assembly ships are coming," Victor pointed out, ever the voice of caution. "They might have sent everything in the sector. This broadcast threatens their entire relationship with humanity." Kate watched the sensors, seeing the assembly cruisers getting closer with each passing second. They were big vessels, each one capable of destroying the mining station with a single salvo from their main guns. But they weren't firing yet. They were probably trying to capture the station intact, to seize the evidence and silence the broadcast at its source, take Kate and her crew alive for interrogation. Then new contacts appeared on the sensors, moving fast from different vectors. The secret fleet had arrived. What happened next was unlike any space battle Kate had ever seen or heard described. The assembly ships moved in standard formation, following textbook tactics that had been refined over centuries and used successfully in countless engagements. But the secret fleet moved differently, with grace and precision that suggested years of practice against exactly this kind of threat. They didn't engage directly at first. Instead, they swept in from the flanks, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision, their weapons striking with accuracy that seemed almost impossible at these distances. Within minutes, 3 of the assembly cruisers were disabled, drifting helplessly with their propulsion systems destroyed and their weapons offline. The other 3 tried to retreat, recognizing they were outmatched, but the secret fleet cut them off, boxing them in and forcing them to surrender or be destroyed. It was over so quickly that Kate barely had time to process what she was seeing. "Assembly ships are standing down," Amy reported, her voice filled with awe. "They're broadcasting surrender codes and powering down their weapons." Kate let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "Linda, how's the broadcast?" "Still going strong. We're at 70% completion. Another hour and the entire package will be distributed across all major networks. After that, it doesn't matter what anyone does. The truth will be everywhere." Kate activated the communication device again. "Nathan, thank you. Your ships just saved our lives." "That's what we're here for, Captain. And you just gave us what we've been waiting for 80 years. The broadcast is spreading faster than anything can stop it. Within a day, everyone in human space will know the truth." "You did it, Kate. You really did it." Over the next hour, as the broadcast continued and reached its completion, the scale of what they had done began to sink in. Messages poured in from Earth, from the colonies, from ships scattered across known space. Government officials demanded answers and explanations. Military commanders wanted confirmation and access to classified data. Scientists asked for access to the technical specifications so they could verify the claims. And ordinary people, millions of them, wanted to know if they were really in danger, if an alien invasion was really coming, if their governments had really been lying to them for their entire lives. Kate tried to answer what she could, sending brief messages confirming the authenticity of the evidence and directing people to additional sources. But it was overwhelming. The story had taken on a life of its own, spreading through networks and conversations, being analyzed and debated and discussed by billions of people. Some rejected it as an elaborate hoax despite the evidence. Others accepted it immediately and demanded action, but nobody could ignore it. And then the Assembly made their official response. The message came from the Assembly's High Council, transmitted on all channels with maximum priority override. A Velkoth official appeared on screen, their alien features composed but showing signs of stress in the tightness around their eyes and the slight tremor in their voice. "People of Earth," the official began, speaking through a translator that gave their words a slightly mechanical quality. "What you have seen in the recent broadcast contains elements of truth mixed with dangerous speculation and misinterpretation. Yes, there are operations in the forbidden zones. Yes, humanity encountered alien technology before official first contact. But the characterization of these events as preparation for war is inaccurate and inflammatory." The official continued, explaining that the forbidden zones contained research facilities studying dangerous phenomena that could threaten all species, and that early human encounters with alien technology had been carefully managed to prevent panic and ensure safe integration into galactic society. Everything had been done for humanity's protection, they claimed, to ease the transition and prevent the kind of cultural shock that had destroyed other primitive civilizations. The secret military was a misunderstanding of legitimate defense forces operating with Assembly oversight and approval. It was a careful response, admitting just enough truth to seem credible while denying the most important parts. Kate watched it with a mixture of anger and admiration. The Assembly was good at this, at managing information and controlling narratives. They had centuries of practice, but they had made one mistake. They had waited too long to respond, and in that time, Kate's evidence had spread too far. People had seen the photographs, watched the videos, read the testimonies from hundreds of sources. They had seen proof that couldn't be easily dismissed or explained away with smooth words and official reassurances. And then someone unexpected joined the conversation, someone Kate hadn't anticipated. Kate's monitor suddenly displayed a new transmission, this one coming from Earth itself, broadcast from an official government facility. It showed an older man in a military uniform covered with medals and insignia, standing in what looked like the Pentagon's main briefing room. Kate didn't recognize him at first, but Peter did. "That's General Howard Chen," Peter said, his voice tight with surprise. "He's the chairman of the Earth Defense Force, one of the highest-ranking military officers in human space. If he's making a public statement, it means this has reached the very top of the government." The general began to speak, his voice steady and clear, carrying the weight of authority earned over decades of service. My fellow citizens, what you have heard in the broadcast from Captain Kate Morrison is true. I can confirm that humanity has been maintaining a secret military force since 1947, operating in facilities hidden throughout the Forbidden Zones. I can confirm that we have been preparing for the return of an alien threat that attacked Earth decades before official first contact with the Galactic Assembly. He paused, letting that sink in, giving people time to process the magnitude of what he was saying. I can also confirm that this preparation was necessary. The Assembly knows about this threat. They have always known, and they have been complicit in maintaining the secrecy, believing that humanity was better protected through ignorance than through knowledge. But Captain Morrison is right. It is time for the truth. It is time for humanity to know what we face and to prepare ourselves accordingly with full knowledge of the danger. The general went on to announce that Earth's government would be declassifying documents related to the 1947 invasion and the subsequent preparations. He called for an emergency session of the United Colonies Council to discuss defense coordination across all human settlements, and he invited Captain Morrison to Earth to present her evidence to world leaders and help coordinate the coming response. Kate stared at the screen in shock, unable to quite believe what she was hearing. She had expected denial, suppression, possibly even attempts to arrest her and silence her permanently. She hadn't expected validation from the highest levels of human government. "They're using us," Victor said quietly, his analytical mind seeing through the politics. "They're using our broadcast as cover to reveal what they've known all along. This way, they can claim they're responding to new information instead of admitting they've been lying for decades. It's damage control." "I don't care," Kate said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "As long as the truth gets out, as long as people know what's coming and can prepare themselves, I don't care who gets credit or how they spin it for political advantage." Over the following days, everything Kate had predicted began to happen, but on a scale even larger than she had imagined. The Assembly tried to contain the information, sending messages to their member species explaining their position, but it was too late. News of the secret military and the coming threat spread across all of human space like wildfire. People demanded answers from their governments and from the Assembly. Scientists demanded access to the captured alien technology so they could study it and verify the claims. Military personnel began to come forward with their own stories of strange assignments and unexplained projects, adding their voices to the growing chorus of truth. And deep in the hidden facilities of the Forbidden Zones, the secret military began to emerge from the shadows. Ships that had been operating in silence for decades started appearing in normal space, dropping their stealth systems and revealing themselves. Weapons platforms revealed themselves, massive installations that had been hiding in plain sight. Thousands of personnel who had been declared dead or missing suddenly contacted their families with stories of where they had really been, what they had really been doing all these years. Sophie Turner's daughter received a message from a mother she thought had died 42 years ago. Families across Earth and the colonies learned that loved ones they had mourned were alive, had been alive all along, serving in a war that no one knew existed. The reunions were joyful and painful in equal measure, filled with questions and explanations and tears, with joy at the return of the lost and anger at the deception that had stolen so many years. Kate watched it all from the mining station, feeling both proud and exhausted. They had done what they set out to do. The truth was out there now, impossible to suppress or deny. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge was still coming. The swarm was still out there, getting closer every day, and now humanity had to actually prepare to face them. Nathan contacted her on the 5th day after the broadcast. His face on the screen looked tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who had carried a heavy burden for a long time and finally set it down. "Captain Morrison, I wanted to thank you personally. What you did has changed everything. We're seeing recruitment numbers we never dreamed of. Shipyards across human space are being converted to military production. The colonies are organizing defense forces and pooling resources. Humanity is coming together in ways we haven't seen since the early days of space exploration. What about the assembly? Kate asked. How are they responding to all this? They're adapting, which is what they do best. Now that the secret is out, they're positioning themselves as partners in Earth's defense rather than overseers who kept us ignorant. Some of their member species are even offering to share technology and resources for the coming fight. It's not perfect, and there's still a lot of anger about the deception, but it's better than the alternative of them actively working against us. And the swarm, when will they arrive? Nathan's expression grew serious, all trace of satisfaction vanishing. Our best estimates still say 6 months, maybe less. We're tracking their scouts, watching their movements, analyzing their approach patterns. When they commit to the full invasion, when the main fleet moves into attack position, we'll know well in advance. But Kate, you need to understand something. Even with everything we've prepared, even with humanity united and ready, this is going to be the fight of our lives. We might not win. I know, Kate said quietly, but at least we'll face it with our eyes open. That's all anyone can ask for. Nathan leaned forward, his expression intense. Captain, I have a request. General Chen meant what he said. We want you to come to Earth to meet with military leaders and government officials. Your voice carries weight now. People trust you because you risked everything to tell them the truth. We need you to help coordinate the response, to be a bridge between the civilian population and the military, between Earth and the colonies. Kate thought about it for a moment, considering the implications. She had been running for so long, hiding and fighting, that the idea of going to Earth openly seemed strange, almost unreal. But Nathan was right. She had started this. She needed to see it through to the end. All right, she said, we'll come to Earth. The trip took 3 weeks, traveling on one of the secret fleet's fast courier ships that made their old shuttle look like a child's toy. Kate and her crew were treated as honored guests, given comfortable quarters and access to everything they needed. It was a strange contrast to the months they had spent as fugitives, living on recycled air and dwindling supplies, always looking over their shoulders for the next threat. But Kate tried not to think about the irony too much. Earth looked beautiful from orbit, a blue and white jewel hanging in the darkness of space. Kate hadn't been home in 3 years, and seeing it now made her throat tight with emotion. Whatever happened in the coming war, whatever the cost, this was worth protecting. This world that had given birth to humanity, this pale blue dot that held billions of lives and countless dreams. This was worth fighting for. They landed at a military facility outside Geneva, where the United Colonies Council was holding emergency sessions in marathon meetings that lasted days. Kate was escorted to a conference room filled with high-ranking officials from every major government and military organization on Earth and in the colonies. General Chen greeted her personally, shaking her hand with a grip that conveyed both respect and gratitude. Captain Morrison, thank you for coming. Your actions have given us the opportunity we've been waiting for, the chance to unite humanity under a common cause, to put aside our petty conflicts and face a real threat together. The briefing took hours, stretching late into the night. Kate presented all the evidence she had collected, answered questions from officials who wanted every detail confirmed and verified, who needed to understand exactly what they were facing. She told them about Threshold Station, about the people like Sophie Turner who had sacrificed everything to keep Earth safe, about the threat that was coming, and the time they had left to prepare. She showed them the tactical projections, explained the enemy's patterns and weaknesses, outlined the strategies that Nathan's people had developed. Some of the officials were skeptical, asking pointed questions and demanding additional proof beyond what she had already shown. Others were ready to act immediately, calling for full mobilization and military buildups that would strain every economy. But by the end of the day, after hours of debate and discussion, everyone agreed on one thing. Whether the threat was as immediate as Kate claimed or not, whether the evidence was completely accurate or slightly exaggerated, humanity needed to be prepared for the possibility of war. The Council voted to establish a unified defense command, pooling military resources from Earth and all the colonies under a single chain of command. They authorized the integration of secret military technology into civilian production, allowing companies to build ships and weapons using designs that had been classified for decades. They initiated recruitment drives across human space, calling for volunteers to serve in the defense forces and offering incentives that made service attractive. They allocated enormous budgets for defense production, money that would have been unthinkable before the truth came out. And they appointed Kate Morrison as a special advisor to the Defense Command, giving her a voice in the strategic planning and preparation, recognizing that her unique position gave her insights that traditional military officers might lack. Over the following months, Kate threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. She met with engineers who were reverse engineering alien technology, offering insights from what she had learned on Threshold Station, and connecting them with Nathan's people who had decades of experience. She spoke at recruitment rallies across Earth and the colonies, telling her story and encouraging people to join the defense forces, to be part of something larger than themselves. She advised military planners on tactics and strategies that Nathan and his people had developed over decades of secret preparation, helping to integrate those lessons into the training of new recruits. It was exhausting work that consumed 16 or 18 hours of every day, but it was also meaningful. For the first time since she had discovered those alien pods in her cargo hold, Kate felt like she was making a real difference. Not just exposing secrets or running from danger, but actively helping to build something that could protect humanity from annihilation. Greg became an engineering consultant, working with shipyard teams across multiple colonies to upgrade Earth's fleet with improved weapons and defenses. His practical experience and willingness to challenge conventional thinking made him invaluable. Linda joined the communications division, helping to establish secure networks that would be critical during the coming conflict, networks that couldn't be jammed or intercepted by the enemy. Victor worked with xenobiologists and medical teams to prepare treatments for injuries and exposure that might result from fighting the swarm, studying the limited data available and developing protocols for dealing with unknown alien biology. Amy trained as a combat pilot, putting her navigation skills to use in the new defense forces and quickly rising through the ranks due to her natural talent. And Peter became an intelligence analyst, studying the patterns of the swarm's scouts and trying to predict their invasion strategy, looking for any advantage that might help humanity survive. They had all found their places in this new world, this humanity that knew the truth and was preparing to fight for its survival. And Kate couldn't help but think that this was what they had been meant for all along, that every step of their journey had led them to this moment. 6 months after the broadcast, the sensors detected what they had been waiting for with a mixture of dread and determination. The swarm's main fleet had arrived at the edge of human space. Not dozens of ships, not hundreds, but thousands. A dark tide of alien vessels moving with terrible purpose toward Earth and the colonies, an invasion force meant to consume and destroy. Kate was in the Defense Command Center when the alert came through, coordinating with fleet elements across multiple sectors. She watched the tactical displays light up with red icons, showing the size and composition of the enemy force. It was everything Nathan had warned about and more. This wasn't a raid or a probe. This was an invasion meant to wipe humanity from existence, to add Earth to the long list of worlds the swarm had consumed. General Chen stood at the command console, his face grim but determined, showing no sign of the fear he must have felt. All forces, this is command. Execute Defense Protocol 7. All ships to designated positions. All stations to combat readiness. Civilian populations to emergency shelters. This is not a drill. The war has begun. Across human space, thousands of ships moved into position with practiced efficiency. The secret fleet emerged fully from the shadows, no longer hiding their strength or capabilities. Earth's regular military deployed in coordinated formations that had been drilled endlessly over the past months. Ships from the colonies joined the defense lines, crews from 100 different worlds united under a common purpose, fighting for their homes and their future. And in the command center, Kate Morrison watched the battle begin, knowing that everything she had done, every sacrifice she had made, every risk she had taken had led to this moment. Humanity was no longer ignorant. They were no longer unprepared. They knew the truth about the enemy they faced, and they were ready to fight with everything they had. The screens showed the first engagement, human ships meeting the swarm's advance vessels in a fury of weapons fire and tactical maneuvers. It was the beginning of a war that would determine humanity's fate. But for the first time since the nightmare had started, Kate felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who didn't understand the danger, who thought everything would work out because it had to. But the hard, determined hope of someone who knew exactly how bad things could get and chose to fight anyway. The hope that came from seeing thousands of people working together, united by truth and driven by the simple desire to survive and protect what they loved. Whatever happened in the battle that was unfolding across the screens, whether humanity won or lost, whether they survived or perished, Kate knew that revealing the truth had been the right choice. People deserved to know what they were fighting for. They deserved to make their own choices about how to face the darkness, to stand together with their eyes open rather than die in ignorance. And as the war began in earnest, as human ships clashed with alien invaders in a battle that would echo through history for as long as humanity endured, Kate Morrison stood in the command center and watched her people fight. Not as victims, not as prey being hunted by a superior predator, but as warriors who understood their enemy and refused to surrender, who would fight for every inch of space, for every world, for every life. The truth had set them free from the comfortable lies that had protected them. Now it was time to see if freedom and knowledge and unity were enough to ensure their survival against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far older and more advanced than humanity. Kate didn't know if they would win, but she knew they would fight, and sometimes that was enough.